Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Wednesday afternoon. We've got several things we want to chat about today. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the storms. We're going to talk about COVID and related subjects, and we're going to take your questions. I'm going to begin by just talking about, I guess we could call it the storm report. Some of you have been out and about today. There's been a lot of flash flooding. We've seen flash flooding on Vandeventer at Lindell, Vandeventer at Delmar. We saw some pictures of a couple of streets on the hill. The fire department has been out rescuing stranded cars, several of them. And you know the deal. Don't drive into that big old puddle because there were a lot of people that got stalled out and had to be rescued of sorts. We also had a lot of trees down, and this began on the worst, I guess, on Monday night, and then again the storm that we had this morning. We had at least 30 whole trees that were toppled. 7 of them hit homes, and a number of them blocked streets. At this point in time, all the big trees or tree limbs are taken care of. If you still have issues, we believe all the streets are cleared of the damage, unless something just fell recently. We believe all the streets are cleared, and so if you do have an issue, please contact Citizen Service Bureau. It is on Twitter. It's at STLCSB, and on, of course, 622-4800. So contact them if you still do have an issue. I just want to say a huge thank you to the street department, to the forestry department, parks department, who have, and of course CSB, Citizen Service Bureau, who've been taking these complaints nonstop, who have really worked hard during these storms. Some of you might be wondering, well, how's the Mississippi River? It's still fine, way below flood stage. Our ground here is very saturated, though, but what moves the Mississippi River up is, of course, the storms that are received to the north of us. So I'm sure all this rain that we're receiving now is probably causing some problems a little further south, but right now we are fine here in St. Louis with regard to flood stage. Okay, now let's move on to talking about COVID. And I'll give you some of the numbers. And then we issued, just an hour or two ago, we issued some new orders. But let me first talk about the numbers. Yesterday, the city of St. Louis had 60 new cases. The number of people in the hospital were 277. 69 people were in ICU. These are regional numbers for the hospital. 42 people were on ventilators. 37 people were admitted to the hospital, and 46 were discharged. So these numbers, hospitalization numbers, have remained what I would call stubbornly higher than we want and than we hope for. What we know in looking at our numbers for the city of St. Louis is that last week, over 50% of the new cases, 51% of the new cases were young people in their 20s and 30s. That, as we look at the first 2 days of this week, we don't have Wednesday's numbers yet, that is continuing to be borne out. In fact, it's even a little higher, but we've only got a couple days, so it's at 53% are just in their 20s and 30s. In fact, almost 30% are folks in their 20s. So we have today issued a new order, it's order number 13, that puts in some additional restrictions. This is a situation that we had hoped to avoid, but I think that as we continue to see these numbers stay high, we frankly know that from the state's information, we know that the state we're likely to get a lot more cases that we receive from the state, because the state's backed up right now, having to do with some computer system glitches. And college is starting right now. You saw that yesterday, I think it was, young people started moving into the SLU campus. So all of that combined has said to us that we really cannot keep these numbers going up in 20 and 30-year-olds. So the order that we issued today does a couple of things. Bars, restaurants, nightclubs, event spaces, taverns, cocktail lounges, cabarets, you know all the names for these. Those folks have to close at 11 o'clock. Anybody who sells alcohol or permits alcohol to be sold on their premises in the case of an event space has to close at 11 o'clock. That goes into effect tomorrow evening, Thursday evening. It does not affect a place that doesn't sell alcohol. I don't know, I'm thinking McDonald's or Subway or some of those folks. It's not a restriction on those, but any restaurant or bar who does sell alcohol will have to close at 11 p.m. As I said, the order goes into effect tomorrow night. It stays into effect until September 7th, so just a little over 3 weeks. In addition to closing at 11 p.m., those same bars, restaurants, clubs, as well as the large venues, have to go from to a maximum of 50% occupancy. That's their permitted occupancy. So it has been at 75%. We're notching that back to 50%. Those are the two biggest things that this order does. It does a couple of other things. It encourages business to encourage their employees to be sure to stay home if they're waiting for the results of a test, or certainly if they have a positive result, or even if they just feel like they've been exposed, they should self-quarantine. Those are the three big things that this order does. I know that it is a hardship for some folks, and I wish that it were not necessary to do that, but we have been in conversations with, of course, Dr. Eccles, but also the Pandemic Task Force and other regional health individuals. Our own Regional Health Commission last Friday morning, Thursday or Friday morning, voted that we should roll back to 50%. And so we didn't do it on that day, but we were continuing to look at the numbers and really felt that this earlier closing of 11 p.m., which isn't that early, but that earlier closing was really also necessary. So that is the big news for today in terms of new restrictions that we hope will help us to roll back COVID. I was speaking with someone this morning, and we were lamenting that this really had to be done, because I think many of us hoped or believed, didn't know any better, that we would be on the other side of this COVID situation by now, but we are not. We're not going to be there anytime real soon. We're waiting, as you know, for vaccines and for other ways to tamp down the spread of COVID. But a vaccine seems to be the only thing that is our best chance at this point in time. So we are going to have to continue to try to coexist with COVID. And so these measures that we announced today are those measures that hopefully will help us be able to do that. The last thing I want to say about COVID restrictions, and this is a recommendation from our health director, and that is that your personal social gatherings, so your birthday party, your graduation party, a picnic, a barbecue in your backyard, these personal gatherings, you really need to keep those as small as possible. And the number recommended is below 25, even less if you possibly can. Because we know we're seeing with really our good businesses around the region are are ending up having to close because they have 1 or 2 or 3 positive cases, and they have to close for a while, and then they're able to reopen. So the same thing goes for your own parties, your backyard gatherings, your kids' graduation, and it's sad. I know you want to have a big party for them, but it really is, or maybe as they go off to school, but it's really something that we are very strongly recommending that you keep to a very close circle of friends, and that you still must wear masks and maintain that social distance. The orders that are in effect right now are on our website. It's orders number 8 and 9. Those were the 2 orders that had all the guidelines for various business types. Those are on our website. It's order number 11, which requires mask wearing, and it's order number 13 now, which is the one we're issuing today, which requires bars and restaurants and event spaces to close. Couple of other things with regard to related to COVID. And that is, you've heard me speak, if you've been watching this recently, you've heard me talk about the rental and mortgage assistance. We have $5.4 million dedicated to rental and mortgage assistance to try to keep people in their homes. The last thing we want to do is to see anybody be put out of their home. We do have an eviction stay in place right now, so no one can be evicted right now if the reason they're behind on their rent is COVID or COVID related, because they've lost their job or their hours have been cut back. People can still be evicted. I had this question last night, if it's as a result of some alleged criminal activity or that sort of thing. So, but the COVID evictions, any evictions because of COVID are stayed. But what we are going to do a week from today, I guess it is, it's on the 19th, the Board of Estimate and Apportionment meets, and I am asking them to allocate $2 million more. This is out of our CARES Act contingency, $2 million for rental and mortgage assistance. I'm hoping that they'll join me and support that next Wednesday, because we've certainly demonstrated the need for rental and mortgage assistance. We are working very closely with the courts in order to take those folks that are possibly in line for eviction or who have eviction proceedings, to take those first and to try to get those funds out. I think on Monday I reported that the first actual payment had been made to a landlord on something that got worked out between the tenant and the landlord, and with our help, so that they could catch up on their rent and stay in place. So that is last thing I guess that I want to say with regard to COVID, because this is all related. You know, the city of St. Louis received $35 million in CARES Act funding from the state. That was about $116 per person in the city of St. Louis. St. Louis County, through no fault of their own, or I guess to their credit, they received $175 million, which was about $175 per person. So St. Louis County got 50% more per person than the city of St. Louis got, and that is the federal governments gave the money directly to counties with more than 500,000 people. Anyone with less than 500,000 people, the federal government sent the money to the state, and then the state allocated money back to the smaller counties. And that's the reason that we that St. Louis County got 50% more than St. Louis City. So we're still trying to get that resolved, still trying to get additional funds from the state, because certainly the people of the city of St. Louis deserve at least as much as the people of St. Louis County. We have a population, a large percentage of our population that is living at or below the poverty line, and therefore are more affected by COVID and by job loss and by their hours being cut, and are in a much more fragile financial situation. So we are still trying to resolve that with the state. And that's all that I have for today. but maybe there are some questions.
Few questions. We have a question from Sarah who wrote in, Mayor. Some of the data on the city's COVID dashboard, the preliminary data over the next couple of days suggests that the positivity rate could go down or is on the way down. So why another health order today?
So, if you're on the city's website and you click on the COVID, what's happening is it's taking a while for these test results to come back. So when you look at the results within, say, the last week, there are still a lot of results that are out there. In other words, we don't know them yet. So we're really looking back almost 2 weeks to get the positivity rate. We know the positivity rate in the state is creeping up there, and we just don't have, I'm looking here we go. We just aren't getting the data back as quickly as we hoped. One day last week, it was on Thursday, I want to say, so it was about a week ago, we had 145 cases, and about 65 or 70 of them were within the last week or 10 days, and the rest of them were as much as a month old. So this is all part of the reporting issue. And what we do know is that the positive cases that we are getting are primarily among young people, 20s and 30s. So that's the reason.
Question from Jenna, Mayor. A couple weeks ago, you talked about taking a surgical approach toward addressing bars, restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So what changed? And then a second question is, Dr. Garza suggested that numbers in the area were headed in the right direction. So why is the city taking more restrictions?
So, that's really interesting. Of course, we talked with Dr. Garza, I guess it was yesterday afternoon. And what we're seeing here, and we have his numbers here, is that hospital numbers are stabilizing, but they're stabilizing at a fairly high level, and those are the numbers that he is referring to. But in addition to that, we have taken a more surgical approach. We have, as you probably know, there were several clubs that were closed for a couple of weeks. We've done training at those clubs, but the increase in cases and the prevalence among 20 and 30-year-olds has continued. That's been very consistent over at least the last month. And with that consistency, we feel like we have to take some additional approach in order to try to tamp that down.
A question from Kimmy, Mayor. How do the new restrictions apply to a venue that might be located inside a hotel that sells liquor?
That's a large venue. Maybe it's a bar or restaurant in a hotel. They would still have to close at 11.
What about places that sell packaged liquor but are separate establishments from a bar or a restaurant?
Yeah, they are not affected by this because they're not serving alcohol in their place of business. It wouldn't be any different than going to the grocery store perhaps and, shopping after 11 p.m.
Question from Brent, Mayor. What can you tell or have you been telling St. Louis's elected representatives in DC about the need for additional stimulus checks, rental and mortgage assistance for people in the city and across the country?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brent, for that question. So we are in close contact with Representative Clay and Senator Blunt and have talked to them a number of times recently about how we know that our residents need additional assistance. I've talked about this several times. I mean, this unemployment ending, I guess it's been a week and a half ago now, maybe 2 weeks ago by now, that the federal unemployment ended. And of course, that's leaving people in a real pinch and causing people to fall farther behind on their bills. And so we've been talking with our representatives about direct payments to individuals, as well as about subsidies for schools, which need some help with regard to particularly technology. And so we're talking with them and encouraging them to come back together. You know, the Congress and the Senate are at a standstill right now. The President issued a couple of executive orders over the weekend, which are a bit confusing, having to do with deferring payments of payroll taxes. But if you defer them and you just have to pay them later, I'm not sure that helps anybody. So we're waiting for Congress to get back to work and get this figured out.
What is your message? A few people have wrote in and asked, what is your message? You mentioned the thousands of college students who are returning to town. One person asked, are they under quarantine since they're new to the coming back into the community? And what is your message or advice to them returning regarding social distancing and all of the other orders?
So no one is quarantined who comes into St. Louis, including college students. I don't know that they want my advice. I bet their moms already gave them a lot of advice. But certainly here in St. Louis, you are required to wear a mask if you go outside. If you leave your residence and you're inside, you're required to wear a mask. You're required to socially distance. And you know, dorms and group living situations, lots of people living in close quarters are really ripe for, if someone is sick, for everybody to get sick. And so that mask wearing is important. Even if you're in a dorm, let's say, and you have a single room, you wouldn't have to wear a you gotta be wearing your mask. It's just we've seen this. We've seen it at the Cardinals. We've seen it at so many places who have had cases. We saw, you know, people are continuing to postpone their events. So I don't know that the college kids want advice from me, but I hope their moms all told them, or their dads, wear a mask, stay socially distanced. We don't want you to get sick, and we don't want you to infect anybody else.
Does the new health order apply, the restrictions on the hours, does that apply to places that are indoors and outdoors? That's a question from Emily.
Yes, it applies to anybody that serves or permits to serve alcohol. So, yes. I can't think of any exception to that.
On masks, we got a question about whether you think the new order indicates that the mask mandate in the region has not been as effective as perhaps we all originally hoped.
Well, since we've had the mask mandate in effect about a month, a little bit more than a month, we are seeing our numbers of hospitalizations stabilize a bit. But if you look back, and I think I have this here to, bear with me a minute. So if you look back to, what's the date, the 11th? The 12th.
Today's the 12th.
So if you look back to 1 month ago, on the 12th of July, we had 180 people in the hospital. Let me make sure I'm reading the right column here. Yep, 180 people in the hospital with confirmed COVID. Today we have 277. Now, other things happened in there, but what we're seeing is that we don't know how much worse it would have been had we not had the mask order in place. So we've tried to take this a step at a time to avoid any further shutdowns, because we just really, you know, I hate having to do this today. I hate having to shut down businesses at 11. But I do think it's necessary because these numbers are stubbornly high.
So we have a couple more minutes and a few other topics, Mayor. Senate Bill 1, can you speak to the latest on that and the proposal specifically in it that the city is supporting?
Thank you for that question. So Senate Bill 1 is sometimes called the crime bill in Jeff City. It is a special session that has been called by the governor. It passed out of the Senate. The reason it's Senate Bill 1 is that it started in the Senate. And this week, Monday, it went over to the House, where it ran into some additional difficulty. There are two things in that bill that the city of St. Louis and I am very interested in getting passed. One is the lifting the residency for public safety officers, police, fire, EMS. Because as you know, I've talked about this many times, we're 142 officers short. We've only got 62 square miles here, 300,000 people. We are the only municipality in the entire eastern half of Missouri that has a residency requirement. and therefore other departments can and regularly do hire people who live in the city of St. Louis, police officers, but we cannot hire anyone who lives in St. Louis County. So we want that residency lifted. The second thing we want is victim and witness protection fund. We know that it's difficult. A lot of times people who know things about crimes that have happened do not talk to police because they're scared. They are afraid that someone will find out that they talked and they'll be retaliated against. So that prevents us from getting as much information that might lead to solving crimes. So we are very much in favor of the witness protection expansion that's available in Senate Bill 1. Now, there are some other things in Senate Bill 1 that we are not so in favor of, and that we think would either be better off maybe not being in the bill or being handled separately. What we learned yesterday, late yesterday afternoon, is that the House has said that they are going to take up each one of the components of Senate Bill 1 individually. So they're going to divide the question. And I believe they're going to come back into session sometime next week, maybe not even until the 24th, which I guess is the week after that. So we're waiting to see exactly what's going to happen there. If the House does when they take up the bill and when they amend or vote parts of this out, we'll likely have to go back to the Senate. So this is all kind of, clogged up, if you will, in Jeff City, because these things are hard, and when you have a number of things in a bill, sometimes you risk getting the things that you want passed. So we have to leave that to our state representatives and state senators and the governor, but we are very hopeful to get witness protection and lifting residency passed and into law.
We are almost out of time, but we have two last questions for you today, Mayor. Maria asks if it was Chief Hayden or someone from the city who asked the Attorney General to have authority to help prosecute murders and crime in the city of St. Louis.
It was not. It was not. That is, Judge Jimmy Edwards was in Jeff City this week and last week, as was Chief Hayden, and he was asked about this. Our position is that every county in Missouri has an independently elected prosecuting attorney. Most of them call it prosecuting attorney. Here we call it circuit attorney, and that we should leave it at that. We should let the people's vote stand.
And then Lindy's question, Mayor, was you recently announced that we will be getting some assistance from about 50 federal investigators.
Mm-hmm.
What is your message to people who might be a little skittish about that or fearful when they hear that federal investigators are coming to St. Louis?
So we continually have relationships with FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, U.S. Attorney's Office, and have partnerships with them to help solve crimes, prevent crimes. This is 50 additional individuals to do that same thing, to work in collaboration and cooperation with the St. Louis Police Department. It is not any individuals that would be coming here to intervene on protests or protect federal assets. It is simply to add the manpower, the woman power to the St. Louis Police Department to help us intervene and solve the crimes that are happening. As of today, we have 164, I believe is the number, homicides in the city of St. Louis. That is the highest it has been in decades, really, at this point in time. So we are about 30%, over 30% more homicides so far this year. And that's an untenable situation and extremely heartbreaking for those families and friends of the victims.
That's all we have time for today, Mayor.
Great. Thank you all. Be back to you Friday.